Hi, I'm Danny Black, and welcome to the @SportsBalt podcast. On this podcast, I will be talking sports cards, collectibles, memorabilia. I'll be interviewing hobby guests. I will be talking about my own thoughts. I'll cover regular sports that relate to the hobby. That's the fun part. More importantly, I want you along for the ride. So click like and follow for more content, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, welcome back to another edition of Sports Ball, the Baltimore Sports Collectibles podcast. I am joined today by hobby legend, or more importantly, my friend, Jeremy Lee. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing good, Danny. Thanks for having me. It's always good to hang out with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you've obviously been on and had more guests on a podcast than anybody can count. So I wanted to try to not make you repeat things you've done on other podcasts, but I think it's impossible. But we're going to go for it today. So at the end, if I've completely failed, let me know. If you've had any fun, feel free to like and subscribe. So I want to start out with, I think there's a dichotomy in the hobby. And you're one of the people I love just talking hobby with. For those of you who don't know, Jeremy and I sat at the industry summit for like hours over several days, I think, solving all the world's problems. So I did, number one, just for this conversation, so people know, I have seen the tag product in person, just for conversations. Jeremy, we'll talk more about tag later. And we've talked off air. So I want to be honest that, we enjoy each other and I think, share a lot of the same values. But that being said, not everybody in the hobby does. And I find this dichotomy. So I find, and I want your thoughts, people who are both passionate collectors, but they don't enjoy people who like to invest. And somehow they get a little judgy. There's people who are slow to change, but they want everything to be better. There are people who form great friendships, like you and I have met and become friends, but then there's still an old boys network. So I keep finding these dichotomies. And then everyone has their own approach to collecting, yet I feel like some of the companies look at us in the same lens. So is this a generational thing? Am I making this up? Are there 2 different or 20 different types of people in the hobby? Or am I just a neurotic Jew? Tell me, Jeremy.
I think you're right, Danny. I mean, the hobby is bigger than it's ever been before, and it's really a cross section of society in general. We can't expect the hobby to be that much different from real life. And especially when you have so many different approaches and opinions and people from all walks, shapes, it's really, you're never gonna have consensus in anything. And the hobby is it's an arena where people can be themselves, they can express themselves, they can approach it however they want. And in today's world with social media, everybody has a platform. If you want one, Instagram account, Twitter account, YouTube, those sorts of things. So, what I do for myself, because I understand your dichotomy discussion. Yeah, I don't agree with everything everybody does. And I also want to enjoy the hobby. I want to enjoy it. The hobby's been a priority in my life for 42 years. And it's not going to stop being one. So I think we have, just like we curate our collections, I think we should curate the content that we consume and just make sure and protect it. We have to protect ourselves from negative influences, whatever they may be. My negative influences, or what I see as a negative influence, might be the opposite of what other people see. And, there's a whole narrative out there right now on, negative content, and is it negative or is it informative? And I don't really care which one it is. If I'm watching it and it alters my mood in a negative way, I'm probably just going to stop consuming that content and really enjoying the hobby my way. So, your general theme of opening there is correct. You're not just neurotic. It's the way the world works, and it's the way the hobby works.
Well, you're wrong. I am neurotic, but you're right about everything else. But here, no, in all seriousness, I think as I hear you talking, it does mirror life and it mirrors society to a certain degree. I guess the hobby, I think maybe the pandemic sped up some of this separation or some of this division where we seem to have gotten to where you've got to take a side, almost collector or investor, or I feel like I'm going to be judged. And I'm somebody who's truly both. If there was a middle independent party of the hobby, I'd like to think I swim right there. I love both sides of it. I have a personal collection. I mean, I got stuff all around me, and I work as a private broker and I sell, and I have as much fun doing that sometimes. Do you find that people are less open-minded and they have kind of whatever they've done? And I know you personally are not like that. I know that you personally are about whatever kind of attracts you. So can you talk about your relationship to collecting, and then, do you see that mirrored in other people, or do you think that's a little bit more unique?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you in that I'm a collector, but I'm also an investor in the hobby. But it's not like I set out deliberately to be an investor. And I say this a lot on Sports Cards Live and elsewhere, whenever I'm about to spend money that is significant to me, I have to consider the investability of those dollars and the investability of what I'm purchasing with those dollars, because I've got a family, I've got a retirement coming in 25 years, whatever it may be. So to me, when anybody spends money that's significant to them, and for me that might be $500, to someone else it might be $50,000, and to someone else it might be $50. It's up to you. We're all unique in that way. So when I'm buying a card for what I consider significant dollars, I consider what that might be worth in the future. So does that make me an investor, or am I trying to protect the bottom? I want to just make sure I can get out what I have. I don't really know, but I can tell you that cards can be investments if you have a long enough horizon, and if you are savvy in how you do it. Because I don't really know, like, what's the definition of an investment? Is it something that I can buy today for $1 and sell later for 1 plus N? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just or 1 minus N. Maybe I'm going to lose money. But these things go up and down in value. Does that makes them a financial instrument just by the definition of financial instrument, I believe. And so I think they are I think they can be looked at as investments, but not everybody has to look at them as investments. You can just look at them as collectibles. So I collect cards. Some of those become investments because I bought a card 10 years ago for $1,000 and I can sell it now for 10. That's a $9,000 return on $1,000 outlay. Can I just save time and confusion and call that an investment? Like, why couldn't I? So to me, collectors here, investors here, I don't know if anybody is on any extreme end. We're all on this continuum somewhere. And it all just depends on how we look at it for ourselves. If you're smack dab in the middle, that's great. If you're somewhere else in between, that's great. And the other thing, Danny, is that it might not, you can't maybe just say, I'm here, like this is where I am on that continuum and I'm always there. I have some cards that I purely collect. I have some cards that are more investable. Great. So it depends what you're buying and what you're collecting at that time, I think. So that's kind of like, I love cards, Danny. I love them. I can look at, I have a couple sitting on my shelf behind me. I look at them, I get butterflies in my stomach. That's an emotional reaction to freaking cardboard. Like, yep. But it's, my whole life has revolved around it. So it's just who I am. It's what I am. And I love collecting cardboard.
Yes. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's also something, the longer you're in the hobby, the more you're able to enjoy the cards for the card's sake. I think even as a little kid, when I first got started, if I bought a Eddie Murray or a Cal Ripken, I wanted to know how they did that year, and that was an investment thought, but, you want to feel validated in what you buy. I think, once you've done this for a couple decades, you realize there's cycles. I mean, somebody in my common bin is going to be hot in a couple of years and I have no idea. Somebody who I think is, the next thing is going to end up falling down and never playing again. So I think you do end up riding the waves a little bit more. Would you say that, maybe this is obvious, that there a little bit of experience goes a long way in the hobby?
Definitely. It definitely does. And you know what, even for, 40 plus years into the hobby, I'm still learning things. I'm still discovering new cards that I can collect from the past. That's a lot of fun. And I think, if you're newer in the hobby, you have to allow yourself to make the odd mistake, maybe, buy a few cards that you find online somewhere, and maybe they land and you don't love them. Be okay with moving on and just selling those cards or trading them away. You have to kind of meander your way through the hobby to find those things that you're really going to love, unless really the full assortment of selection out there, which some people do. But even a guy like me and you, I'm sure as well, who've been in this for decades, we're still discovering new cards that came out in mostly the 90s. That's really where I discover new cards from. So I think that experience goes a long way, and experience goes a long way because we've seen cycles. We've seen I had a shop during the junk wax era in the early 90s. I remember the subprime mortgage issue in 2008 and what happened then. I remember the run up of vintage in 2016 or 17 and what, so if you see these cycles, you've seen the market go up and down, you've watched and kept kind of tabs on production and supply and demand in the hobby, you can be in a pretty good place. So there's a lot of narrative out there, commentary, like someone put it was Breakout Cards put a question on Twitter the other day. It says, what is killing the hobby? Well, my response was that question implies that the hobby is dying. Hobby is not dying. So really, right? The hobby is not dying. There will be sports card collectors longer than any of us will be alive. So the better question would have been, what is hurting the hobby? And sure, there's been things hurting the hobby forever. So that's nothing new. It's just that now there's so much more talk about it because we're a technology world, we're a social media world, so we're able to put opinions out there, and people are able to hear other people's opinions and thoughts on it. But I gravitate towards content creators who have been around for 10 plus years at least. Not to say I don't like some of the newer entrants into the hobby that have content. I consume their content as well if they take the approach that they are new to it and they're not pretending to know everything or trying to know everything or, putting their opinions out there as facts. I think it's human nature to project your perception out into the world, and your one person's perception is never going to be a complete picture full of all the facts and all the unknowns, because you just can't know it. So I try to consume content from practical content creators, realists, and those that are really just staying in their lane and talking about what they have experience in.
Well said. I don't know if you remember the movie Patch Adams.
I don't remember it, but I've seen it.
Yeah. So there was a great line in the movie where the roommate is a real jerk, and Robin Williams is talking to him. He says, "Your problem is you think being an asshole is new to you." There's been so many people who think there's something special about what they're doing just to cause trouble or just to do something. That's not new. Clickbait has been around before they called it clickbait. That being said, I think that it is always helpful to better anything in whatever way you can better anything. So that being said, you have a content creation background. I have been in front of a camera a couple times. But I think we've learned some stuff over the years. And I get questions all the time. Hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I never have kind of good points ready at my fingertips. So I thought you and I could just kind of talk and brainstorm some things we've learned over the years. I jotted down a couple. Feel free to react or jump in. But the first thing for me was just start. It's like writing a book. There's no right answer. Just start. You don't have to show it to anybody. You don't have to do anything. But you have to start. So that one jumped out at me. And then that ties into number 2, which is no one really likes to watch what they do. So relax.
Yeah, I'll jump in there on your comment of just start. That's the best advice you can give anybody. A lot of people are going to overthink it, and they're going to wait until they feel like they've created this perfect formula or recipe for a podcast or for a video, you have to, you're so right. You have to execute. You just have to do it. Just do it. And with that, you have to understand that it's okay to not be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to regret some things that you say. That's okay. Just start. I love that, Danny. That's the best advice. When I get asked this question, I have 3 or 4 points that I give people, and I should add just start to it and go to 4 or 5. But my advice is be consistent. So if you're going to put out a podcast and if you're going to say you're going to do it weekly, do it weekly. If you're going to do it monthly, do it monthly. But at least do it in a consistent manner that people know when to expect it and they don't just kind of forget about you. And then my other 2 are, you have to have some subject matter expertise, which I think allows you to be, especially if you're passionate about it. So again, consistency, be passionate about it for sure, and be authentic. If you do those things, then again, subject matter expertise you have to have. Otherwise, what do you start a podcast on a different topic that you have some expertise in? And I love your just start. So what I tell people, consistency, authenticity, and passion.
Well, I mean, maybe we've both learned some lessons that prove there's some truth to this. So those were my first 2. And then I have, I combine 2. Don't be afraid to watch other people and absorb, but remain authentic to yourself. It's okay to grow and learn, and you should, but you have to be authentic. And I think that's speaking to what you were saying. Talk on something where you're an expert. You should be in your lane. And if you're not in your lane, like you said, well, change. So I like that. And then, this is one that I've heard you say over and over, and I want to repeat it because you can never say it enough times. Prepare and have fun.
Yeah. I mean, when I started Sports Cards Live, I'm almost 3 years in now. I mean, it'll be April it'll be 3 years in April. And I remember I used to come down here to this room, half hour before I'd start, and I'd jot some notes on a piece of paper, and then I'd go ahead and interview my guest. And over time, I evolved my process to now I have it pretty streamlined, and I can meet with a guest before the interview or before the live stream and get through what I need to get through and not miss anything. It comes back to just don't be afraid to start and understand. You said it before, Danny, very well. Continuously improve. Always try to improve what you're doing. And if you always try to improve, you'll keep impressing your viewers or your listeners, because they'll see something different and they'll be excited that you're keeping them on their toes, if you will. So preparation is very important. I've been told by my guests that nobody prepares like I do, and I love hearing that. And maybe that's why my podcast has achieved the level of success. I don't want to say it's successful, but it has achieved whatever level of success it has. And it's because I want to do it as best as I can. I don't want to ever come away, every night when I'm done or the next morning, my wife says, "How was your show?" And I always say it was great. Like I come away always very happy with how it went. So that, but you also alluded to it earlier. I don't watch my own shows. I will watch or listen to me on someone else's show, but I don't know if I've ever watched an episode of Sports Cards Live back, which is kind of funny.
You know what? But it's so common. And that's why I wanted to mention it, because I think people think it's just them. And it's not. This is a common thing. I do find myself watching back moments. Like I'll be in the middle of an interview and I'll think I hear them say something, and I don't want to say it in the middle of the interview, but I'm going to go back and double check. Was that word used, or did they really describe it like that? But I don't really want to watch myself, other than if I feel I really need it for my own growth and learning, which is a real tough pill to swallow some days. But
yeah, for sure. The thing that we, so there's also different styles of content and podcasts. Like you do a pre-recorded podcast, and then you can edit it. A lot of videos on YouTube, most videos on YouTube are edited posts, they take they capture their footage and then they edit. I do no editing. I do one take and it's done. So if I misspeak or I say something that doesn't make sense and maybe makes me look bad, I can't take it back, but I have to allow myself to do that and be comfortable with it. And if somebody ever sees me be inconsistent or say something that doesn't make sense, I mean, it's going to happen because I'm thinking on the fly and I don't always think that well. So, you know, I allow myself to do that and I'm okay with it now. And I just have to be able to, you know, have discussions if somebody wants to call me out on something, at least explain that, hey, yeah, I misspoke, or that's not what I was really thinking, or, you know, sometimes you don't have time to think something through and you have to just be okay with that. But that's with how I do it. If you edit your videos, you can always do another take. Say, that didn't sound so good. Hold on, stop video. Let's re-say or re-speak those thoughts. I don't have that luxury, but I watch pre-recorded podcasts or YouTube videos all the time. And I know that's going on. And those people have that advantage over me because they can correct what they meant to say.
Well, I'm going to actually reveal a little bit. I don't edit it 1 minute. I pre-record for the convenience of myself and the guest, but that is the only reason. And I'll peel back the curtain. Is I have a life and I have children, and my guests have a life and they have jobs other than waiting around for me to call. So I find it a lot easier. And I guess the gosh forbid scenario that, you know, the sprinklers go off, the internet goes down, and everything crashes at once. You know, I'm not live when it happens. Other than that, I don't want to edit it. I am very comfortable making mistakes. I mean, I'm a father of 3. You know, I have plenty of people that tell me I'm wrong all day. I'm okay with that. You know, that's fine. I also, I don't know, certain guests I feel like I want to protect. You know, should they make a mistake, and I'm going to be fully transparent. I do feel that way with certain guests who are not as comfortable being on camera or don't have the experience, but I want to make sure their story is important and it gets out. But I've yet to ever edit an episode. So I hope my streak continues and I haven't jinxed it yet. But I respect what you're saying. And I do live with Hobby Hotline, and my new show will be live. So I did radio, which was live. So there's a whole different component to live. That is a runaway train, and you're doing it all on the run, and it's actually exhilarating. I do lose a little bit of that component. So I will say, if nobody's ever done it, there's an adrenaline rush. I don't know about you, but it takes me a little while to come down after a live show. How about you?
You nailed it, man. It is exhilarating doing a live show. I remember when I first started in 2020, I would be Saturday night. I'd do my, my shows are 2 hours for the most part. And at the end of the show, it'd be such a letdown because I got no one to talk to now. So, I have a couple of friends I'd get on the phone and debrief, get some feedback from. And so then I started doing a late show because I wanted more of that thrill. So I did a late show called After Hours. I've done 60 something episodes of that. I don't do it as much anymore, but I was doing those and they were a lot of fun. But you're right, it is exhilarating. And the other thing about, like, even for yourself, you just mentioned that you don't do editing, and forgive me for that assumption, but by not editing, you become that much more authentic and just less of a sort of manufactured content, I guess you could say. There's a lot of that out there, and some of it is wonderful. A lot of it is great. I watch a lot of it, but there's something to be said for the one take or the live. And basically a one take, like you do, is almost the same thing as a live. The only thing you don't have is that the audience talking to you during the episode, the chat, which is fine, right? You don't always want to, not every podcast needs to integrate viewer comments. So,
and I was about to ask you that question. As somebody who does different shows, do you find you get a different, I don't know if it's feeling or different personal response or different feel when you do different shows? And without going into specifics, there's some of them more personal, some of them more professional, some of them earlier in the day where it's harder to get going, some later in the day, that type of thing. Because I find that For me, some of my personal stuff where I'll be honest, I'm going to get less views than some other shows I'm on. I have a much more relaxed conversation because I find my guests seem more relaxed. Maybe if I'm ever have more viewers, everybody will tighten up. But I enjoy that. I don't feel the need to grow it if I'm enjoying what I do. If people enjoy it, I hope they watch. But I totally do this show for me. This show has no other audience other than anybody who cares about what I care about. Right. So when you do different shows, and I know you don't do something like this, but when you do different shows, and I want you to talk about how you started specifically in Facebook, because I think that ties into where you are now, and people should know that. Can you talk about kind of the emotional feeling you get on different types of shows?
Okay. Yeah. So you want me to describe like why I went live for the very first time?
Well, yeah, and the feeling of that versus the feeling of maybe having to interview an industry guest, which are two very different feelings.
Sure. So I'll do this quickly, but I went live for the first time on YouTube in April 2020. It started because in March of 2020, I wanted to sell some vintage hockey cards, and I didn't want to go through the eBay process of scanning, listing, all that. So I wanted to just do a thing where I would just be like, hey, I got this card for $20. Hey, I got this card for 200, and just do that. So I reached out to a Facebook group, a vintage hockey group, and I said, do you mind if I just stream live to your group and sell cards on a video? They said, yeah, no problem, but you can't show anything after 1989. I said, fine. A couple days later, I went live. I had stacks of cards here, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and I showed them, and I sold a bunch of cards. And then I had a bunch of people reach out and say, that was a lot of fun. You should do more of that. Basically the Whatnot model before Whatnot was even conceived. And I thought, whoa, people enjoyed that. That was great. And then I thought, well, now I want to sell modern cards. I can't go to that other Facebook group. And there's like 1 million modern hockey Facebook groups. So maybe I'll start a new group called Sports Cards Live, which is for live streaming sales, right? Again, the Whatnot concept. Who knew I had a $3 billion idea back then, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I managed to lock down the name Sports Cards Live on Facebook and on YouTube. And then I thought, well, I'm going to go live on YouTube now. And I did my very first episode. It was just me. And it was like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this channel, but here I am. And let's see where it goes. I haven't watched that one back. I don't even remember what I said, but that was April 16th, 2020. A Thursday. 2 days later was Saturday, and I'm like, I'm gonna go live again on Saturday. Maybe I should bring somebody on and interview them, just to have a conversation. So I reached out to Carvin Chung, who invented Exquisite and the cup, and an industry veteran and really a stalwart.
Way to start low, by the way.
Well, exactly. But I was very strategic, Danny, because Carvin, like, I didn't want to get pigeonholed into being just a hockey guy. So Carvin appeals to basketball as well. And I was really starting to ramp up my basketball collecting, or I was about 3 years into ramping up my basketball collecting. I thought he'd be a great guest because he invented Exquisite. So I'll get the basketball people on. I was becoming friends with a bunch of basketball collectors. So we went live and had a great experience. And you talk about emotional reaction. I mean, the day before, I was nervous, butterflies. The day of, I remember waking up thinking I'm going live tonight. I was super butterflies in my stomach, that feeling that makes you almost nauseous. But we went live and it went really well. And then I was like, well, I guess I got to find someone to interview for next Saturday. And actually, I got to rectify that. I started doing Wednesdays, and for the first almost year, I did Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I was really busy. And I ended up I guess I stopped doing the Wednesdays in December of that year, but it was exhilarating, as you said, so much fun. And, planning guests, wrangling guests became a whole thing. And then I started doing these two different styles of shows. One I called Industry Insiders, and one I called Collector's Perspectives. So I wanted to do Wednesdays was going to be a collector, Saturday would be an industry insider. And when I would bring on an industry insider, I would be a little bit more nervous because, they're representing their brand, and I want to find my place in this whole world of content I wanted to always make sure I could get more industry insiders and more people wouldn't say no to me. So, I wasn't ambushing people with my questions. I was trying to make sure that it was a fair interview. And the nerves went away after, by about episode 15 or so, I stopped getting nervous. And then what happened was, fast forward a year into it, Collectible reaches out and says, "Hey, we like what you're doing. Would you do something for us?" I said, "Well, yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. I'm going to make some money, and I'm going to have them help me find the guests and all this." And I liked what they were doing. I had their founder on my show, Ezra Levine. I had him on like 10 months before. So and on that interview, they said, we really want to be a content hub. And then, 10 months later, they wanted to do content with me. I respected that they were kind of putting their money where their mouth was, and Ezra was following through. And so now I have to kind of take a different approach, because I'm not only representing myself and my personal brand, Sports Cards Live, I'm representing the Collectible brand. But, I'm by that point, I'm in my late 40s. I've been a professional in my career for 25 years. I felt like I was qualified to represent other brands. So, the emotional reaction was, first of all, the amount of flattery that I felt that they wanted that was like, I felt like I'd been auditioning for a year and a half, and I finally got that call back, which I wasn't, but that's the way it felt when they said, little did I know I've been auditioning, and now I've got somebody who wants to pay me to do this. Like, what a good feeling that was. And then the PWCC show started to happen, because with that, this is funny, Danny, one day, every month when PWCC was still on eBay, their different sports would end on a different day. So Thursday would roll around once a month, and the hockey auctions would end. And I'd be, all right, honey, I'm going to be downstairs for 3 hours as these end every 5 seconds. And I'd pull up my tabs and I would watch them. I'd bid on a couple, but I just wanted to watch them end. It was so exciting, that last 5 seconds when all the bids come in. And I thought to myself, I think it was maybe it was February of 2021. I said, hey, I've got this channel. People are going to know that I'm going live. I'm just going to go live and watch these auctions end with my audience. Well, it became a very well-watched show and theme, kept on doing it. And then I partnered with them too. It became like, well, I'm doing this anyway. Let's see if they want to get involved. And I forget if they called me or I called them, but I knew people there. And so, that became a monetized episode for me as well. And, here we are, been covering their premiere auction. It'll be 2 years in May, and we're going to keep on going. So, and again, now I'm representing their brand, and I have to be responsible about that. And so I feel like I am. Now we fast forward again, Danny, and Tag Grading approaches me and says, hey, we like what you're doing. Well, there's a whole story how I got involved with Tag, but come to today, now I work with Tag, and I have to be really careful not to turn my shows into all about Tag. And that's, because I want to remain authentic to why I started doing this. And I don't want to use Sports Cards Live as a platform to advertise Tag. I can't help but talk about it sometimes, but I'm going to say, I think I've done a really good job of not alienating my viewers and listeners by making it all about Tag Grading. So I hope that kind of answered your question. I'm sorry I got a little bit long-winded there.
No. That's exactly. And I think part of the reason I want to have this conversation is content creators share a lot of similar emotions and feelings, but we're oftentimes a little reclusive, and we don't share this with each other enough. And I think for people who, like we said, just want to get started, these are all normal things that we feel and we go through. We've all gotten nervous. We've all, had the big guess that you wanted to make sure you got right and you thought about for a couple of days. And then, the first time you ever represent a brand or, anything like that, all of a sudden it's not you. Am I going to have that slip of the tongue that we talk about on live air? Am I going to, say the wrong word or the wrong brand? And talk about a feeling like you're parachuting sometimes. That's a whole different feeling. Less exhilaration, but just as scary sometimes.
Yeah.
But once you get the hang of it and you're working with companies you like, it's really cool.
Yeah. So I was just saying that's the key there, because it's so. You asked me earlier, what advice do you give a content creator? I said, be authentic. So as soon as you start receiving compensation from a brand, your authenticity immediately comes into question from other people in the hobby. They will say that anyone who receives money from a brand can no longer be completely objective. There's probably some truth to that. So the challenge and but it's a challenge I welcome for me is, okay, I'm now receiving compensation. I have some sponsors. I do shows for other brands. I need to remain as authentic as I possibly can. So one of the ways that I do that is that I don't just take money from anybody. I turn down sponsorships all the time. I get emails regularly. Some have nothing to do with sports cards, so those are easy. But I will not align my brand with any brand out there that I don't respect and do business with. And some of the brands that I do respect and do business with have a history of controversy, but that's fine. I'm a grown man. I'm allowed to decide who I want to do business with and what brands I'm willing to align mine with. And I've done that. And it's, if listen, you're never going to please everybody. You're always going to, especially when you start to have sponsors and that sort of thing. Some people are going to question, are you selling out or are you endorsing their behavior from 10 years ago and all these different things that come up? The answer that I give is, I know these people. I've met them in person. I've shaken their hands. I've looked them in the eyes, and I am willing to align my brand with theirs. And that's really what it comes down to. And just like I said earlier, I curate the content that I consume. I really want everyone else out there to curate the content that they consume. And those people who know me have been with me from the beginning of my content, or even have known me for 20 years in the hobby. They know me at my core, and they know that I'm not looking to do anything nefarious or commit any fraud or misrepresent any other brand or myself. So I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin, Danny, and that allows me to do what I've been doing.
Yeah, I first of all, you are, which is part of the reason that I liked you as a content creator before we got to know each other. And I think that's something important for people to pay attention to, is there are other shows that are far more influenced by also who they receive sponsorship money for. So just make sure you are getting like any of your information, some sort of balanced view, and you're not getting a commercial. That being said, I want to talk about industry-wide grading problems or grading concerns that affect the entire industry. But for full disclosure, can you let everybody know what you're currently doing with tag grading in your title? Because I think that'll give you, give your answers a sense of perspective, because I think that you agree with a lot of what I'm going to bring up as challenges.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to give a bit of history, if I may. I'll do this quickly, but in July 2021, I'm at the national setup as a content creator, and the founders from Tag Grading came up to me and said, "Hey, we'd like to show you a presentation on our iPad. Do you have a minute?" I said, "Sure," not knowing who they were, what they were going to show me. I look at this presentation and I was blown away. 2-minute little thing on an iPad. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. That's all I saw, 2 minutes. Said, "Thank you for showing me." They said, "Yeah, well, we exchange information." Kept in touch via a couple of emails over the next 8 months. February 2022 rolls around, and they reach out to me saying, "We're basically ready to reveal ourselves to the hobby now, and we'd like to maybe do it on your show if you'd be willing to." I said, "Well, I need to learn more." So I flew down to LA, saw the tag facility, met the people, met the lead grader, who is the one who really, with his team, taught the AI. You don't teach AI, but you communicate with the architect of AI and their team and make sure that, anyway, I met the lead architect of the AI. I met the lead grader, who Scott Maxwell, 9+ years as a senior grader at PSA. And I was blown away by what I saw. These guys weren't just set up in a basement. They had legitimate space with equipment and process. And anyway, I fell in love with what I saw when I was down there. Every question and concern I had, they had an answer for. They had thought of it. I came away so impressed. Agreed to do these shows with them. We ran 5 shows, basically introducing them to the hobby. in spring of this year, and it just so happened coincidentally that my job was ending July 15th that I had as a professional, as a CPA. And I said, hey guys, I'm a free agent now. Is there something for me? And I joined the company. So beginning September, I've joined the company in a business development role. And so, my title VP business development. So I invested my own money into the company. That's how much I'm all in on tag grading. You want to set context here for the rest of this discussion we're going to have. I'm all in on tag grading. I've invested money into it. So what significant money? It's an investment, not a hobby, in terms of my investment. And I've joined the company and I get compensated by the company on a monthly basis. All that said, Danny, it's also important to know that I've been collecting graded cards for 20 years. I have a significant amount of value tied up in PSA slabs and Beckett slabs. I have a couple SGC, a couple CSG, but I've got 30% of my net worth in PSA and Beckett slabs. So that's significant. And all that said, what tag brings to the table is something that I love, and I'm all in on tag as far as, and I'm all in on the hobby.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you my impressions of what I saw at the summit. The plastic, the case, I believe there's like a clear scale in plastic. It's like 50 points. You guys are, I think, 2 points from the clearest possible. There is no blue. And I got to tell you, in person, it is stunning. The printing of the label is not a paper label. Very, very impressive looking. The fact that you did not give me any valuable cards as a take home, I'd like to say is a negative. I think that should be a part of your process, is when people get to see tag, they get like a free mantle. So no, I know you guys are starting with 2,000 forward, but
let me write that down.
Yeah, right. But that being said, I think part of the reason you were attracted to tag is some of the things I want to bring up that are things that we all know, having PSA, having, Beckett or whatever it may be, and just kind of react to these. There's a ton of secondary market pressure. I think everybody feels that, and I'm going to go a step further, saying different errors have different market pressure. Even though PSA may apply a lot of it, you can go pre-war, you can go 90s, and you're going to feel different pressure from different companies for secondary value. Inconsistencies. The idea of submitting the same card to the same or different companies, I think, is something that either creates, a false arbitrage or is frustrating, at best or worse. General lack of transparency. I think that's just a fair comment. And up until recently, not a lot had changed in a long time. So I'm going to actually say, I think at this point, most of the companies since the pandemic have invested in some sort of growth. But it was a long time coming, and it was only, I think, recently that we saw that at all. And then, there's still the buy the card, not the grade group because of the inconsistencies in the grading. So that creates kind of this double secondary market, behind the grading to begin with. Are these things as a collector you've felt? Do you think I'm being too critical, or do you think this is head on?
No, I mean, you're nailing a lot of the concerns with grading companies. And I think a lot of us collectors have felt like we've had no other options for so many years. And we are forced to use these incumbent companies because those are our only options. And, listen, before I start to talk about some of the negatives about the incumbent companies, I want to say that we have to give them credit. PSA, Beckett in particular, these companies really helped legitimize our hobby as something that these cards have value by slabbing the cards, assigning grades. It allowed people to buy cards sight unseen remotely on platforms like eBay, back in the 90s when the internet came about. And now more recently, with real investors coming in and putting money into big cards, they need to know what they're getting. So I think one of the problems, like you touched on a lot there, I'll start with transparency. We don't know why we get the grades we get from the incumbent companies. Uh, you can't ask why. You don't get graders notes. You don't know why. And I think that that's really, especially when you're paying a lot of money to get a card graded, with PSA, especially who charges you based on the value of your card. If I'm paying $1,000 to grade a card, I think I've paid for the right to know why it got the grade it did. And I just don't think it works I just don't think that it works into their business model or their formula for them to do that. So that's fine. But if we're going to continue to use those companies, we have to just understand that you're not going to know why you got the grade that you get. And it also allows them to be inconsistent. And I don't say that that's all that allows them to, but they have no choice. That they cannot not be inconsistent because they are human and they are grading through with a human eye. And the human eye can be very biased, unintended bias. But if you're, we hear it all the time. Oh, your grader had a bad day, got dumped by his girlfriend the night before. No 10s, no 9s, only 6s and 7s that day. I mean, listen, I don't know that it comes to that it gets to that level, but there's definitely an impact on the grades based on the grader's mood, because we're human beings, or they are human beings that are grading the cards. So the fact that you can resubmit a card to Beckett or PSA over and over again until you get the grade you want, which is something that people do, that just tells me that, why are you paying for it the first time if you're just going to send it back, pay for it a second time to get a different grade? I always wish that they would just get it right the first time. I don't think they're able to get it right the first time consistently. Many times, yes. How often? My guess is that they get it right 50% of the time. That's my personal perspective based on my experience dealing with PSA and Beckett in particular. So, at TAG, listen, TAG wants to address a lot of these issues. And one of them is transparency. Transparent flips, so the slab is beautiful. Transparent grade. You get a full detailed grading report with every card for the price of grading. It's not an upcharge. It comes automatically. So that's wonderful. And a transparent process. One thing I've never understood, when I go to the National or a big card show and they're set up, you can do on-site grading, but they're hidden behind this black curtain because there has to be something to hide. Maybe it's simply the identity of the graders. I don't know. When TAG is set up at the Burbank show in February, we're not going to be behind a black curtain. You'll be able to see your card getting graded. I love that about what we're doing. And to me, that just shows that, hey, we have nothing to hide. So, inconsistency, it's been proven that the grading companies are inconsistent. That's not going to shock anybody. Again, why resub? I'm going to resub. I'm going to go for that half a point bump on one of the subgrades so I can go from a 9.5 to a 10. That does not make sense. Anyone who's not in the hobby, Danny, looking in on us would think we're a bunch of idiots. I mean, so TAG does not want resubmissions. TAG just wants to get it right the first time. Our system is AI based. So we grade on a 1,000 point scale, and then we assign an industry standard 10-point grade. So we're going to come within 4 points of 1,000 every time you submit the same card to us. But again, don't resubmit the same card. We don't want the same card. We want to grade each card once. So I'll let you jump in. I can keep going.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have had you on if I didn't know that TAG was addressing some of the industry concerns. And I was fascinated when we talked at the summit about a lot, how many of those things were checked off. And I'm gonna do a little bit of the talking for TAG. They were around for close to 10 years before you got involved. And there's a technological component that I don't think people realize. We're talking very hobby, but we're talking probably the tip of the iceberg in what's actually beneath to get something like this up and running. And I think that's one of the things that, to be fair to any grading company, the machine and just the processes and the security, and there's just so many things that go into it. It's a challenge for any company, but much less when you're starting something that's never been done before. So I just want to establish that this was not a pandemic company,
No.
nor could it be. I mean, it's physically not possible, if you're not familiar with the type of tech. That being said, also, I think, we talked about this at the very beginning. This is an industry that wants better, but is slow to change. So, I think by hitting some of the pain points, I think I understand the appeal there. In a lot of ways, I would be more willing to send a car to Tag than one of the other pandemic startup grading companies that offer no other new value to me.
Right.
There has to be a new value. And what you talked about is new value. Nobody did grading before the 90s. People forget that. So grading itself had to mature. And like you said, kudos for the companies that created the industry and got it off the ground so we can even complain about it. But there can be things that are done better. And I think every company's looking at that. Tag just started a long time ago. And I'm very curious when you guys open up fully. I'm going to be sending some of my cards in just for the clear of the slab. And I'm going to make sure I email you for a good grade because I think that's how it works, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
AI stands for email Jeremy.
Yeah.
But that being said, have I missed any? I mean, listen.
A couple things. There's a couple things I'd like to add, if I may.
Yeah. Please.
So first of all, customer service. Tag is going to give the best customer service in the hobby of the grading companies. We value our customers so much, and so I'm going to be really proud of that. Let's talk about secondary market values. That's something people always ask about. Like, how are Tag cards going to sell relative to PSA? So listen, I think it's foolish to assume that cards and Tag slabs are going to sell for the same values of PSA slabs at time zero. Right out of the gate. They're probably not. The hobby isn't as familiar with our brand as they are with the companies that have been around for up to 30 years. That said, I don't know that Tag really needs to compete on secondary market value. Now I'm going to go in a couple directions with this. Firstly, there's a lot of people out there that just want their cards graded for other reasons. They want to enjoy them in a slab. They want uniformity in their collection. They want to know the condition of their card, and they're not looking to sell it tomorrow. So they don't really need to worry about what the card would sell for tomorrow or even next month. They just want to know what the actual grade is. Because I once submitted a card to a grading company, it came back at 5.5. I submitted again, it came back at 9.5. That's a 400 basis point difference. Tag is going to be within 4 basis points, one way or the other. So call it 8 even. 8 versus 400. Huge difference in terms of consistency and accuracy. Also, when you look at the value of Tag slabs on the secondary market, there's not a lot out there right now, so you can't really get the data. There's not a lot of data out there right now, so it's going to be hard to really make a generalization. But I believe that Tag slabs will catch up in value to PSA slabs a lot quicker than most people think. And again, I've got a lot of PSA slabs. I think it's going to happen in well less than 2 years. And here's why: because there's a lot of big money coming into the hobby right now, looking to invest in these big cards. When they realize that a PSA 10 might be an 8. Well, do you want to go spend $5 million on a PSA 9 that might actually only be a 7 or an 8 or even an 8.5? I think they're going to want more security over the actual grade of the card. I mean, PSA themselves has a policy saying if we misgraded a card, we have a guarantee. So they admit, and they have to, because they're human, that they misgrade cards all the time. So Tag's not going to misgrade cards. I mean, listen, I shouldn't say that, because no one's going to be perfect, right? But I think the frequency that Tag will erroneously grade a card will be minuscule compared to the human grading companies. So I think that the investor level purchasers of cards are going to want a more verifiable, accurate grade. And I think that's where Tag's going to come into play. And I think that, listen, people may call me crazy, but I think it's going to happen faster. And eventually I think Tag slabs will be worth more than PSA slabs, because you just know the accuracy of the grade. So right now, Danny, I heard you say this on a show a month or so ago. You said, I would only advise my clients to grade with, PSA or SGC or Beckett, whoever you said. I think that that's fair for right now, if your clients are looking to sell those cards in the next 6 to 12 months, let's say. But if you're looking long term, I kind of cringe when I see all these PSA reveals. I'm like, well, a lot of these people are probably just going to resubmit their cards with tag down the road because that's where the real value is going to be. I know I'm sounding pretty crazy right now, but listen, I mean, it's logical to think that way. Audited financial statements are much more relied upon than unaudited or reviewed or compilations, because there's just been a better meticulous review of them. And so I kind of look at it that way, that tag is providing an audited grade, and you can read that audit report because we give it to you with every card. There's no smoke and mirrors. The human grading companies are reminiscent of times before there were any controls over financial markets and people could just run haywire. So I think tag slabs are going to surpass any of the other grading companies in terms of values a lot quicker than other people think. I don't think it's going to take 5 years. It might take 2, but that's what that's kind of what I think is going to happen. But I'm also, listen, I'm all in on tag, but I'm only all in on tag because I believe this stuff, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of us is wearing a tag shirt and it's not me. I mean, so I understand the perspective you're coming from, and I wouldn't talk to you if I didn't think there's a lot of problems that are being solved. My question for you is, as somebody who likes vintage, because your quote on me is probably accurate, I'm not going to hide from that quote. I was probably talking vintage. So I'm excited to try tag. When do I get to submit pre-2000?
Yeah, so right now tag is only grading 2000 forward. And that's the $1 million question. When are we going to move back? So tag, I know our intentions are definitely to move back into the 90s and then the 80s and then the 70s. I'm not sure how far back we'll go ever. Are we going to go back to 1910, 1909? I don't know that we'll ever do those cards. I don't know that how much of a priority that would be either for us at this point, Danny, because a lot of those cards are already in slabs. There's those pop reports aren't, how many more Mickey Mantles are there to be graded? Do we really need to spend money to develop our system to handle those eras? Do we need to change things so that we're treating them differently than a card produced in 2010? I don't know the answers to these questions, but the fact is they're not making any more of those cards to be graded anyway. And with PSA grading 1 million cards a month, that population is disappearing on us. So do we really need to focus on vintage at all from a business perspective? So Absolutely. Meanwhile, they're making 1 billion cards a year moving forward. There's going to be lots of cards in 2023, 4, 5, and forward for tag to grade. So I hope we do go back, because if and when tag goes back and grades all the cards, I mean, my collection will all be in tag slabs, because I respect the company. I respect the grade much more than I do the product that I receive or the service I receive from the incumbent grading companies. Now, again, listen, I thank them for propping up the hobby and giving some legitimacy to it. But I think it's time for the hobby to take that next step and have a real legitimate grading company come out and by legitimate, I mean accurately and consistently grade and reproducibly grade cards. And I think, like you said, you've said it really well, Danny, the hobby, I forget how you say it exactly, but we want change, but we're slow to change. We want better, but we're slow to accept better. It's going to move in that direction. Every industry has been disrupted in the last several years. The sports card industry will be disrupted as well. Fanatics disrupted it from the way they've gone about it. Tag, listen, I'm not saying we're going to be like a Netflix or an Uber, but we're probably going to be like a Netflix or an Uber in terms of the impact we have. But a lot of people will laugh at when they listen to me right now. I know there's people laughing, listening right now. Watch and see in 10 years where the hobby's at.
Well, I will say, as somebody who's seen it in person, if you guys get a chance to come across Jeremy or the tag team at any shows, it is worth seeing the product in person. It is worth seeing the reports. It's worth seeing, what they're able to do. And this gets back to, I think, stuff we talked about before. Don't be too stubborn to open your eyes and look at something. Listen, No company is going to have 100% of the consumers, nor is that I think anybody's goal. But you're not doing your due diligence as a consumer, collector, or investor to never pay attention to what's going on around you. So
Well
I would just say from that perspective, I was thrilled to see it at the summit and be exposed to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one or two more points, if I may. It's really important that I get out there that TAG is not looking to reinvent grading standards. We're simply adding automation, applying automation to them. So we're not going to overgrade your cards because it's a computer doing it. Where we have mechanisms in place to make sure that, you know, things that are like non-human observable defects, we call them NHODs, don't get penalized past a certain threshold, because we're not looking to create new standards. The standards that are out there are pretty good. I mean, you have to consider eye appeal, you have to consider human, what we can see. So I just, people can get scared and think that, whoa, it's a computer, they're going to overgrade, going to be way too tough. Not the case. Another comment is that, you know, I was set up at the Toronto Expo last month and I had some tag slabs in my showcase. I had a tag 6.5. I might have had a 4.5 in there, and others. And, you know, I've heard some comments that, well, you know, people say, I saw 4s and 6s. Like, I don't want 4s and 6s. Well, those cards were 4s and 6s, you know? I also had 10s and 9s and 8s and 8.5s and all that in there too. So I just want people to really understand that tag is not recreating, reinventing, not disrupting the hobby that way. We're simply applying automation so that we can have consistent, reproducible, accurate grading, and that you know what you're getting when you buy it in a tag slab, because it's consistent, and it's been 10 years in the making to develop this system. So yeah, that's really all I wanted to add.
Okay. Last things, because we've gone way over your time that you've promised me. I want to talk about this perception of your collection. Okay. Talk to me about, in 30 seconds, your non-hockey collection. I've heard you in the different interviews. You've got like some ridiculous stuff in your collection. And every time people talk to me, they say, well, Jeremy's got this great hockey collection. No, Jeremy's got a great collection. So can you flex a little for just some of the stuff that you're comfortable talking about? Because I don't hear you talk about it enough.
Sure. I mean, I collect Hall of Fame rookies, all sports. And I mean, here, I can just I keep all my pictures in a Dropbox, but I mean, these are some of my cards. I think you'll recognize some of them just from this angle.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it all. I mean, you know, and these are,
some of those are on my opening intro.
Yeah, right up at the top there. I love the Reggie rookie right there, one of my all-time favorite cards. You know, get into some more 90s stuff. I have some Griffey, but, you know, I'm really proud of what I have here at the top. My Jackie, that's a PSA 6. My Mickey Mantle rookie, that's a PSA 6 as well. That's my Hank Aaron, my Joe DiMaggio, my Koufax, my DiMaggio up here, right over there. My 53 Babe Ruth. So number 53 from 1933, yep. Babe Ruth. And I don't know if I'll ever have a Honus Wagner T206, but I've got the caramel card right there. So, you know, that's just my baseball. I've got basketball collection. I've got, you know, all the important basketball rookies for the most part right there. You know, you can see some of the big
guys.
Right
Jeremy
there.
Lee is a card nerd. This is what we do.
I love it.
I think people need to understand, you know, that, yeah, like, it goes and goes.
It goes on and on. I mean, listen, I have so many PCs within my overall collection. I think I just showed you images from my Dropbox. Each of the basketball was one folder. I've got like 33 folders in there, and they're all different sort of areas of my collection. So, you know, I've got almost every hockey card going back to 1910. Yeah, I've got a very comprehensive collection. It's, you know, I'm not going to share what it's worth or what I have into it or anything like that, but it's my collection is my number one biggest asset, I would say. I think I said earlier, I have 30% of my net worth tied up in cardboard. And I'm looking at it right now, like my house is less than that. So
well, you got to get your house slabbed.
Gotta slap my house. Tag hasn't figured out how to slap.
Well, it's that oversized. That's always it's always hard.
So like, but I'm showing you my cards in PSA slabs, my vintage in PSA slabs, and I think they're all accurately graded? No. Do I care? No, because I love the cards.
But I didn't ask you the grade on a single one of those cards because I don't care. It's the card.
It's the card.
You know, and I didn't even ask you who it was graded by. I mean, it was literally, I want people to understand when you start, selling hockey cards, in Facebook and YouTube, it's because you were a card guy. When you're going through PWCC auctions that are ending every 30 seconds on 28 tabs like we used to have to, that's not for content. That was for you that became content.
Yes.
When I sit through and go through stuff, that's my real life. That's what I really enjoy. So I just wanted to take a moment for us to step away from kind of the professional to remind people that we're in this because we're giant dorks about this. We love it. And I've never been more proud to be called a dork about anything. And I wear that as a badge of honor. And I think you do too.
I call me a cardboard nerd all day long. I love it. It's like I said, man, 42 years I've been collecting cards since I was 8 years old. And I don't think I'll ever stop until I die. And I love that they're worth more than I paid for them when I got them. I think that's really cool. It's a nice bonus along with everything, that there's actual value in this passion I've had my whole life. Like what a great consequence of a hobby is that you have things worth more money than you paid for them. I mean, how fortunate and lucky are we to have picked this hobby? I mean, I just love sports cards. Like I don't know how else I can put it.
Yes. And I'm not going to even try to top that. My outro doesn't exist, so this is the official outro. Jeremy Lee, thank you for being on.
Thank you, Danny Black. It's been a slice talking to you.
Absolutely. Hang out in the green room. I've got your blue M&Ms waiting, and catch you guys next time.